Hey guys, I'm here to read you some more of The Wild Robot Escapes. We are on chapter 67, and this chapter is called The Town. Now, last week we read New Land, and they were realizing that it was going to be a lot faster to sneak through the towns rather than continuing to go all the way around. So we are on chapter 67, and it is called The Town. Pookie was a big little dog. Her body was round, her legs were short, her ears were long. Although the dog looked funny, she was serious about protecting her home. She slapped her front paws on the windowsill and stared into the night to make sure all was well outside. But all was not well. A new clump of weeds had mysteriously sprouted in the yard. Pookie needed to get a closer look. The dog whined by the back door until someone let her out. Then she scurried across the porch, down the steps, and over to the mysterious weeds. As Pookie approached, a raspy growl sounded in her throat. "Where did these weeds come from?" she said to herself, sniffing. "They weren't here this afternoon." The weeds rustled in the breeze, and that was enough to set Pookie off. The dog barked and barked and barked, and then, astonishingly, the weeds spoke to her in a clear, calm voice. "I am sorry if I disturbed you," said the weeds. Pookie stopped barking. "I was hoping to pass through without being seen," said the weeds, "but you saw me. You are a very good guard dog." Pookie resumed barking. "No, no, no, shh," said the weeds. "Please stop barking." There was no stopping Pookie. The clump of weeds decided to move. Like some sort of monster, the weeds rose up on two legs and leaped over the fence into the neighboring yard. Felix had heard Pookie barking next door, and when the weedy monster, there's a picture of Pookie, and when the weedy monster landed in his yard, he started barking as well. So the monster kept going, leaping fences from one yard to the next. Every house in the neighborhood seemed to have a dog, and they all began barking about the weedy monster. Reader, you and I know the monster was actually our robot in disguise. But the dogs never did find out what happened that night. Roz finally slunk into the shadows behind a school building and listened as the chorus of dogs settled down. "Well, that didn't go very well," said the goose as he landed beside his mother. "No, it did not," said the robot. "This will only be tougher in daylight." "I know. I will have to try something else." Early the next morning, the sun started rising, automobiles started driving, robots started running errands. However, one of those robots was not like the rest. Roz had picked every speck of dirt from her body, and now she blended in with all of the normal robots, going about their normal morning routines. Our robot was hiding in plain sight. Roz marched through town, turning left and right down the streets as Brightbill watched from above. Along the way, she passed a variety of robots, all going about their business. There was even another Rozum robot marching around who looked identical to our Roz, except she was shinier and had a different unit number. It occurred to Rozum Unit 7134 that if anyone noticed her unit number, it might bring a swift response from the Ricos. As she continued past houses and shops and humans and robots, there didn't seem to be any danger. Everything was going smoothly until she heard an airship flying toward town. Our robot felt something like dread as she waited for a sleek white ship to appear. If the Ricos found her now, there would be no escape. But the ship that appeared wasn't white, it was black, and it flew over without stopping. Roz was safe, and suddenly she was dreaming about airships. Returning to the island would be so easy with a ship. She and Brightbill would climb in, fire up the engines, and be home in no time. But it was an impossible dream. There was no safe way for our robot to get an airship. She had to find another way home. First, she had to find her way out of this town. So Roz focused on her surroundings and continued marching along the sidewalks, just like a normal robot. Chapter 68 is called The Station. At the edge of town, where the houses stopped and the countryside began, was a small train station. Two platforms sat on either side of the tracks. Humans and robots were standing around waiting for the next train to arrive. Nobody paid any attention to our robot as she calmly marched past. When Roz was safely out of sight, she slipped into the woods where Brightbill was hiding. The goose opened his mouth to speak, but the station bells started ringing. Speeding down the tracks was a passenger train. A whistle blew, the train gently braked, and a minute later it came to a smooth stop at the station. Passengers burst out of the train cars while others stepped aboard. The first 9 cars were reserved for humans and had wide windows and comfortable seats. The only robots allowed in those cars were service robots, who brought food and drinks to the human passengers. All other robots were confined to the windowless cars at the end of the train. "Where is it going?" whispered Brightbill as he peeked out from the brush. "The sign says this is the express train to the city," whispered Roz. The goose turned to his mother. "We have to go past the city to get home. This train could save us a lot of time. We should hop on." The robot turned to her son. "I do not think that is a good idea. It is too risky." "Ma, I watched you walk through town and no one even noticed you. We'll be fine. Let's follow those robots into the last car. I'll find a hiding spot and we'll be in the city before you know it." Roz had questions. "How large is the city? Do you know where to go? What if we get lost?" "Relax, Ma. My pigeon friend, Graybeak, lives there. She'll be happy to help us." A voice called out from the loudspeaker and the last couple of passengers hurried along the platform. "I'm going to check it out," said Brightbill. With a quick flurry of wing beats, he fluttered out from the brush and onto the roof of the last train car. The goose lowered his long neck and looked through the open door. Then he looked back and waved for his mother to join him. A whistle blew and Brightbill waved faster. Roz had little choice, so she slipped out of the trees and marched onto the platform. "In here, Ma!" Brightbill pointed down to the doorway beneath him. Everything about the situation made our robot nervous. Her survival instincts were tingling. Roz looked up at her son on the roof, and then she stepped through the train door. But before Brightbill could flutter in behind her, the door slid closed and the train began to move. Chapter 69 is called The Train. Our robot felt something like panic as the train pulled away from the station. She wanted to break down the door, leap from the train and find her son, but what could Roz do? She had to act like a normal robot. She had to pretend that nothing was wrong. The train car's interior was a long, windowless room filled with rows and rows of robots. The robots were all facing forward, all standing still. If not for their softly glowing eyes, you might think they were statues. Some of the robots were perfect and new, but most had scrapes and dents. None more than Rosm Unit 7134. Roz walked down the aisle and stood in the last row, and the train started to accelerate. Faster and faster it went until it reached its cruising speed. Then it hummed along the tracks, occasionally swinging left or right as it snaked around a curve. With no windows, Roz could only wonder how far she was traveling. She could only wonder about the scenery outside. Mostly, she wondered about her son. Was Brightbill okay? How would she find him? Would they ever see each other again? Of course they would. Brightbill was smart and resourceful. The goose would simply follow the train tracks into the city. Then he would find his pigeon friend, Graybeak, and she would help them reunite. Roz just had to stay out of trouble. Time crawled by. The robots gently swayed with the motion of the train. Finally, there was an announcement from the loudspeaker. "Next and final stop, City Center Station." A whistle blew and the train braked and slowed and came to a smooth stop. The doors slid open and the robots filed out. And here's a picture of the train. You can see it. That is where we will stop for today.